This week, Roland Diaz from Tanium is with us to discuss one of the trickiest supply chain security challenges. Then Ross Haleliuk from LimaCharlie joins us to talk about product-led growth and building products in cybersecurity. Finally, in the enterprise security news, a light week in funding after last week's mega raises from Wiz and Sandbox AQ. HP acquires some Zero Trust and CASB with Axis Security. InfoSec-themed tabletop gaming is really catching on. The White House's updated cybersecurity strategy is more of an update than a game changer, at least in my opinion. I go a bit nuts with AI news and essays, but I promise it's worth your time. There's some interesting stuff this week. Doing evil things with Chrome extensions, women in cybersecurity, letting strangers call you on purpose. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Get Over It Day. This is episode 308, recorded on Thursday, March 9th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Master of Marketing, the Mayor of Mayhem, Tyler Shields. How are you, Tyler?
I am doing well, and today has been a perfect day.
That's awesome. Those days are good and should be relished. Also joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I am well. How are you, Adrian?
I'm getting over it.
You're getting over it.
It's been a good day.
I think that's a good mantra for life.
I started off with a dentist, but the dentist is always a good trip for me. That's apparently teeth and hair is something I'm blessed with. So every time I go to the dentist, she told me today, keep drinking coffee because without removing coffee stain, I'd have nothing else to do with your teeth. So I'll take it. I'll take the wins.
Sounds like a good day.
Sean Metcalf is on a boat. So that's something we'll have to also get over. But yeah, National Get Over It Day. I don't know where that comes from, but that is an actual day that is today. All right, some announcements here. Security Weekly listeners, Identiverse 2023 is heading to Vegas. Join the digital identity community at the Aria Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, May 30th to June 2nd. Identiverse is a must-attend annual event that brings together over 2,500 security professionals for 4 days of world-class learning, engagement, and entertainment. I think it was in Denver last year. But yeah, Vegas is definitely has some room for conferences. Maybe they're getting too big. As a community member, you're able to receive 20% off your Identiverse 2023 tickets using code ISV23-SW20. That code is ISV23-SW20. I believe we also have it in the show notes if you didn't get that written down. So check out the show notes as well for this podcast. And you can register at securityweekly.com/Identiverse 2023. All right, our first interview today is sponsored by Tanium. Today's topic is tackling SBOMs, tackling them today, not waiting for vendors to get around to generating for them for you. And we're excited to have Roland Diaz, the Director of Technical Product Management at Tanium, with us today. Welcome, Roland.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Adrian. How you all doing?
Tyler's having a perfect day. Mine's not been bad. How's your day been, Katie?
Good. I've been getting over my procrastination and doing all the things I need to do, so it's been productive.
All right. That's awesome. All right. So yeah, SBOMs, people have been talking about them for decades, but now with the White House talking about SBOMs, much more, I think, the topic of conversation. And one of the challenges here is, I think the original idea is if you ship a product, you also ship a software bill of materials with it, right, Roland? And that's just, it's not happening in a lot of cases. So, yeah, the way I kind of look at it is what we're talking about here is why wait? You can generate it yourself. If you have access to the software, you can pull that data yourself.
Yeah, that's correct. If you take a look at what's happened over the history, a lot of companies never gave SBOMs or software bill of materials, and now everybody's trying to catch up. Since Log4j came out with the Executive Order 14028, there's a real push in the industry to kind of get that. And the challenges that most people face is that, if you have older software sitting in your environment, if you have a large developer environment where they have a lot of open source libraries sitting on their endpoints, you have no idea what it looks like. Most vendors today do what they call build time bill of materials. So they only know about it when they compile the application and deliver it. And what we do is different. We do what we call runtime. So what happens using the Tanium platform, we catalog all the files on every disk in your environment, and then we tell it what ecosystems to look for, whether it's Java, Python, Ruby, native binaries, Go binaries, really doesn't make a difference. Once we've compiled that data, what we then do is we take the jar files or the WAR files and we strip them apart, and we look for all of the dependent libraries, no matter how far down the chain that it goes. So what ends up happening, and probably the best analogy I can give to this is, imagine you have a peanut allergy and you can't eat certain things with peanuts, and there's a cookie jar sitting, somewhere, and you need to know if there's a peanut in there. What we do is we take the cookie, drop it into our analytics engine, it pulls the entire thing apart and gets the list of ingredients, and we display it to you. The challenges that we face in the industry when Log4j first came out was, where are you going to find this thing? It could be buried dozens, if not hundreds of layers deep inside of a jar file or a WAR file, and you're never going to know that it's there. So our advantage is the fact that we look at the file system. We have our own index database that maintains all of that, so we're not crawling the file system. And when you need to do an investigation, in a minute or two, you can go in, look for that library, and then go to your security team and say, hey, I found it, or I found the affected versions.
Yeah, and the thing I like about that analogy that you made with the allergy is it also highlights, something the analogy doesn't actually do well. Kind of highlights, I think, where this became a problem here is it's almost like for all your life you didn't have a peanut allergy, and then all of a sudden you gained one. So like you have no idea what's in your kitchen and in your cupboard. Like this is not something you've ever worried about before. And now all of a sudden somebody tells you, you could die if you even come into contact with peanuts. And now you've got this whole cupboard worth of stuff, and you got to figure out what's in there.
Yeah, and that's been the current problem because, if you think about systems, there's probably applications that have been sitting on disk for years that your teams may not even know. It could be remnants of removed applications that wasn't really properly cleaned up. So having a software bill of material from the vendor isn't really going to help you know that you don't have it on your disk. So that was, kind of the challenge that we faced at Tanium. And we said, well, hey, we have the tool set to go out within a few seconds and ask a question of 1 million endpoints around the world and get this information back. Why don't we just extend this into software bill of materials? And that's really how the whole thing was born. A gentleman by the name of Gareth Jeremiah was one of the heads of it, pulled me in and a couple of other people, and we wrote the thing kind of just as an internal competition within Tanium. And it was so well received that our CEO said, we need to make this a product. We need to build it in. And then, of course, a month later, Log4j happened. And then Apache's Commons came out. Then Commons.txt came out. Then OpenSSL. And it was almost the perfect storm that we had the tool already built as kind of a test bed, just using Tanium. And it ran from there. And now it's part of our product. It's actually a bolt-on module to the product that I'm one of the product managers of, called Asset.
Asset. Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. And one of the other things you said, I think is important too, even if the vendors did do it, unless it's dynamic and it's automatically built with every release, even if a vendor did give you an SBOM, you could have drift with that. And then you have some cases where, Java, I think, is a great example. If you're running Java code locally, there's a lot of cases where you can use their JVM or JDK, or you can bring your own. and point the product at that. So in some cases, the SBOM is more of like a shared responsibility. Like some of the components you bring to the table, some of them they bring to the table. So, even if we were managing them from the vendors, it would still be complicated, I think.
Yeah, and again, to your point, I mean, that's the whole idea behind Tanium, is that we give the definitions to the clients. The clients then get actions from Tanium to sit down and say, hey, monitor your system constantly. So what ends up happening is the first time we lay down our software bill of materials utility, it tells Index to catalog everything in the file system based on the ecosystems that we're looking for. And then what happens is we look at we SHA-256 hash, the binary or the actual physical file that we found. And then once we have that, then we start breaking it down. We start pulling apart that list of ingredients, storing it within the endpoint local database, and keeping it available for research in the event that we need it. We had one developer at Tanium had over 150,000 library links inside of his machine. So just imagine trying to find that at scale. It really becomes difficult. And if you have to react to a situation or a 0-day pretty quickly, you're going to need to go in and find that information. And knowing that you have it is extremely powerful. I mean, just think about it. When Log4j came out, or even more recently, OpenSSL, if you had OpenSSL anything before version 3.0 or after and including 3.0.5, you were safe. But if you had anything in between there, you were potentially vulnerable, and nobody knew. I mean, and that's what SBOM brought to the table, was we were able to go in within a few seconds, query 1 million machines in your endpoint, and get you the results so that you can give it over to your security teams and say, here's everything that's affected by it, so that you can either use, again, another feature within Tanium called deploy or patch, to push out the remediation for that or upgrade that application on disk.
Hey, Roland. Tyler Shields here. I have a quick question for you. You're consistently referring to SBOM in representation of libraries, dependencies, chunks of code on disk. Many times I hear SBOM referred to as dependencies embedded in application code itself. Can you help the audience understand the difference between, say, an application-centric SBOM, a host-based SBOM? Is there any difference, and do they provide similar and overlapping values, or similar and kind of adjacent values?
Well, I'd say that, the biggest thing is that until we find, when I say on disk, what I'm really referring to is the parent file. So after that, there's all of the dependencies that could be buried all over the place. It could be in disk, it could be somewhere in a network share, and you really need to know that. So really, that's what our application does, is it tells you all of those dependent libraries instead of doing an actual physical file search, because that's what kind of happened in the early days of Log4j. People were looking for the log4j-core.jar file, and they weren't able to find it because it was embedded very deep in other code. So, I mean, what we're not doing in SBOM is we're not stripping apart the code, but what we are doing is we are looking at all of the dependent libraries that are linked within it.
Got it. Okay. And then the other thing I often hear mentioned alongside SBOM is VEX, the exploitability exchange. Yes. Do you have any familiarity on VEX and what that is, to educate the audience as well?
So the first thing that we decided to tackle with Tanium was finding whether or not these libraries existed. And that's really where Asset and SBOM came together. Asset's kind of our CMDB. It pulls all the information, applications that are on endpoints, all the hardware information about it. So we said, all right, now we're going to start building that repository for the library. What's coming from Tanium in about another 60 to 90 days is we're going to extend to our vulnerability scanning engine called Comply the ability to take a look at, when a CVE comes in and it says, okay, if you have this library, if you have these other 10 things, and a path to somewhere or an executable, that comprises a security risk, and you need to take remediation on that. And that's really where we're going next. It'll be another feature within the Tanium platform. So it'll give us the ability to pivot real quickly and find that and understand whether we're exposed by those CVEs or not.
So what happens, Roland, when there's software, applications, data, whatnot, that doesn't pass through the endpoint? Because that's one of your strengths. So what about some of the stuff that's internal to the network, may not be moving around a whole lot? How do you deal with that?
Well, the Tanium agent runs on basically everything that you have in your environment. It's going to run all your servers. We do run in a limited capacity on containers. We run on all your desktops. All of your endpoints will run in AWS or Azure, anywhere where you own or have the ability to control that system. What we can't do is we can't sit down and say, like on a cloud hosted application, whether or not they have SBOMs you're potentially exposed to, because you, just like anything else, you don't have access to that system. So we give you the ability to just check your own environment. The way that the Tanium agent works, there's no necessary dependency for really being anywhere other than having an internet connection. So if you have a large mobile workforce, that's not a problem for us. We can work anywhere in the world, even over satellite links. And once we send those jobs in what we call client extensions down to the Tanium endpoint, they do all the work locally and then report the data back to Tanium.
And so what happened? What are companies doing with this now? Because SBOM has been a thing for a long time, but it's only starting to take shape now, as you mentioned, the executive order and other things in the industry that are making it more prevalent. But what are companies actually doing with it at present? Is it more of an awareness type tool? Are they actually triaging it? How are they using this data?
So right now, today, most of the customers that I've been involved with, they've got or they received the build time SBOM reports. And after we ran in the environment, they were surprised to find how much extra they found on their disks because they just didn't know it was there. Going back to you can remove something, but you may not remove all the components of it. So that was really kind of the biggest thing. The next thing that they're really asking us for is the compliance piece, which is, all right, now that I know that I have that thing, how can I get rid of it? So right now, what we've seen in the industry is, let me find it. If it's something that's no longer in use, I'm going to remove it. I'm going to purge it from the system. If it's something that we can patch or upgrade, we'll use one of our other modules to kind of push that down to the endpoints. In fact, there's a big thing going on right now that I'm involved with where Oracle has just changed their licensing for the OpenJDK. And SBOM is finding it on disk where it's not necessarily listed as a traditionally installed application. So if you think about it from a Windows perspective, you can look at the WMI library, you can look at the registry, but that's not necessarily going to tell you everything that's on there. So we can find, those ecosystems, and executables happen to be one of the things that we also take a look at. It's not just standard jar files. I know I've talked a lot about jar, but we look at Go, we look at Python, we look at PHP, we look at Node. We look at anything on a Windows machine that's a .dll or its magic number identifies it as an executable, and then we pull that thing apart and catalog it. So we have just a tremendous amount of data available to us.
In an average scenario, when companies are able to use Tanium or any other SBOM tool to find these vulnerabilities, I mean, we saw with Log4j as well as others that people found ways, not great ways, but in absence of these SBOM tools, found ways to understand their environments and where they were vulnerable. But in some cases, it was still taking them a really long time to upgrade, patch, change access, whatnot. So what are you seeing in terms of actual remediation? Is it taking companies days, weeks, months? I'm certain there are companies out there that haven't patched Log4j yet.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it's taken weeks and months. Oh, go ahead. Somebody was...
No, I was going to say, or they haven't patched it because they haven't found it yet, right?
Well, there is that, but I'm assuming we're talking about, for this particular question, that companies have done their due diligence and they've found it. Because it's one thing to know about it and another thing to actually fix it, to remediate it, to close those holes.
Yeah, so I mean, we had the same challenge in the early days of Log4j coming out because, we have a couple of products that were able to open up some of the jar files and read some of the data within it. But the problem was it was only a few layers deep. So a lot of companies did that simple investigation. They went out, they looked for the physical file that they thought was on disk. And if it was there, they got rid of it and they remediated it. And they're now shocked to find after running our SBOM, because it is runtime, that they have it in more places than they ever knew that they did because of the fact that it was buried maybe in a jar file called server.jar or server.war. And now they're going back and they're taking those remediation steps. And again, I think that's when it goes back to where our comply module comes in, is that Comply is going to be able to grab those CVEs. It's going to understand what libraries that we're looking for. It's going to leverage SBOM and the SBOM library data to say, okay, I have this on disk. And like I said before, I have these several indicators that say now I can be compromised. I am vulnerable. I think that's really the next big thing that the industry is looking for. And that's the reason why it's under, like, we have a whole team of developers right now working on that to get it out. Targeted potentially end of April, I was told, but I'm saying probably April or May is when we should see that start to hit the street and become a feature set now within our Comply module as well.
Great, thank you.
So it's I think an interesting component of this is if people don't know what they have, I'm sure there's a lot of just mess there that needs to be cleaned up. I'm kind of curious about, I don't know how much roadmap you're comfortable talking about, but I'm just thinking of all the action items you might want to take after you get these results back. Like, okay, when was the last time that library was used? Like, certainly, I think people, and this is something where there's even products that all they do is they strip out all the stuff out of a container that you're not using. It actually monitors the container during runtime. And if it doesn't get used, it gets stripped out, and that gives you both the benefit of performance, better performance in that container, because the size of it's smaller, and less attack surface. You're stripping out functions that could potentially be vulnerable in the future that you're clearly not using, so they don't need to be there. So where is this going? Like, maybe, I think this is still the first release of SBOM. Where is this going in version 2? Are you looking into things like, telling me if it's ever been used or the last time, a library was actually executed, things like that?
Yeah, so we already have that within the asset product where we do track usage. So one of the next steps that we're looking at for SBOM is really, to your point, is it being used? What's using it? There's another part of the project that's going on where we're going to try to take those jar files and tie them back to vendor-based applications, kind of doing a file evidence thing to say, okay, these 18 components equal something like IBM Same Time or some other application. The next iteration of it really is after that is going to really be the easy use of building executive reports and then one-click remediation. So if you think about it, if I found something that was vulnerable, either from within Asset or Comply to say, okay, I found it, and now, again, using one of our other products, which is the power of our Tanium platform, is, I don't need to go to another subsystem. I don't need to create a stub out to another application to patch that thing. I can just simply say within Tanium, okay, here it is, get rid of it, remediate it, update it, whatever I want to do to it. And that is all definitely within our roadmap.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, so I think part of this, I mentioned the part of that analogy where you don't have the peanut allergy and you suddenly have it. Are you seeing customers, actually testing this function out? It seemed to me, you mentioned Log4j, but before that we had Equifax. Several years before Log4Shell was an issue in Log4j, we had a perfect example of what can happen to you if you don't know how to find vulnerable libraries in your environments. Equifax knew that the struts, there was a serious critical struts vulnerability, and they dropped everything, tried to find it in their environment, failed to find it, and then, moved on to doing other things until that vulnerability was used against them. And famously, they had a pretty large breach. But so I guess where I'm going with this, how do you see customers using this product? Is this something that they're, break glass in case of use, or are people actively trying to, make sure that they can find things with it? Are they actually testing things out with this tool?
Well, I mean, you're correct on struts. I mean, when struts came out for us, we had to write a whole bunch of sensors and packages to be able to find it on disk. And it definitely took a while to fix and remediate. What we're seeing right now in the industry, especially in like financial services or in FedRAMP, that they want this stuff in inventory. They want to know that it's there, and they want to know when a 0-day comes out, again, within a few seconds, do I have it or not? I've been telling all my customers, look, get ahead of the curve. Start building these catalogs on your machine. Because once I pull that cookie apart, unless you put a new cookie in the cookie jar, I don't have any reason to do that analysis again. If the hash of the file changes, we'll strip it apart again and see what changed in it. So if you happen to remediate it, we can now mark it as remediated. We do give you the ability to build executive reports so that you can show changes over time, so that you can go to your CISO and say, okay, look, here's what our exposure was on day one, and here we are 24, 48 hours later. So really, it's the speed. It's really the speed to market and having all of that stuff in inventory.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking of it, kind of from an operational perspective. Like, I would love to just go to one of my developers and say, hey, give me the name of something weird and obscure that we use, and let's make a scavenger hunt out of it. See if we can find it. Because maybe they forgot to put Tanium on a couple systems, or, I just, from somebody who did disaster recovery back in the day, I know that typically, unless you've actually tested it, you've maybe done 50, 60% of what needs to be done, for it to work in the time of need.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the other use cases. I mean, we had customers going through audits and we're looking specifically for jar files that were licensed and they didn't know where they were. So again, using SBOM, because I am doing the search and I am capturing the paths, I can tell you whether you have it, what machines you have it on, the exact path where you can find that file. So now if you're getting into a licensing scenario, you can know exactly where it is. And that's the reason why we're going to that file-based evidence piece as part of our future project, to sit down and say, okay, this jar file equals this application, which is a commercial application, which comes with licensing costs. Much like we're doing right now with the Oracle OpenJRE issue, because they're changing their complete licensing model.
Oh, interesting.
So with everything coming out of the White House, sometimes this is really good. It sets a great example for companies and things can take off. But sometimes they just end up being checkboxes, especially when there is a new rule or regulation. What do you think the impact on the industry is going to be? Because unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these pieces of guidance or frameworks or even regulations turn into the minimum viable security, right? They're checkbox requirements for compliance sake. What do you think is going to happen with this? Do you think this is going to go that way? Do you think companies are really going to embrace it as breach protection?
So I would say, if you look where we were a year and a half ago with Log4j, and then the rapid fire of all of these other vulnerabilities that were based on open source came out, companies, especially, financial institutions are really, they want to get ahead of the curve. They don't want, when a new vulnerability comes out, to have to spend days or weeks, or if not months, trying to find what they have in their environment. And that's really where we're helping them. It's kind of the preventative thing. The analogy I like to use is nobody buys a burglar alarm until after they've been burglarized. Well, in this particular case, this is your burglar alarm. We're guarding you. We're putting all the rails around your environment. We're giving you the visibility into what you have, so that when the next bad thing does get exposed, you're going to be able to remediate it way faster than any of your other competition. And you're not going to be in the news. You're not going to be the next headline about, hey, look, all this information got stolen from Equifax because they had a vulnerability they didn't know about.
What are going to be the ramifications of this? We saw with GDPR, obviously, that they were going to implement fines, but in some cases, the fines weren't that impactful to certain types of organizations. So what are going to, other than, hey, we hope everybody does security for security's sake, and we hope people do what's right, and SBOM will be one of those things, but what are going to be the penalties or the ramifications beyond, hey, keep your systems secure?
Well, I think it's, you got to worry about reputational, whether people trust you or not. A lot of people lost trust in Equifax, so it's a lot more than just a monetary fine. Do you as a company want to sit down and say, hey, look, because I didn't spend a little bit of money on prevention, that, all your personal information got leaked out and now you're the victim of identity fraud? Sorry. I don't think that's really a good example for anybody. I know I wouldn't. I worked in the healthcare space for 20 years before I came over here to Tanium. Now, I was never a security guy. I've always been on the, inventory and on the endpoint management side of the world. But I've had to deal with that where, we got breached. We had critical information, or we were victims of things like ransomware, where it's a real problem. So,
have you
security,
seen certain,
everybody takes seriously.
Yeah, sorry, I overlapped with you there for a second. Are you seeing certain industries, like more highly regulated industries, healthcare, you mentioned financial services, have more initial interest, or is this one of the, early adoption type things for more forward-thinking tech companies and such?
I would say of the customers that I've done POCs for, the lion's share with them, either in the federal space because of the executive order. Financial services has always been ahead of the curve. I mean, they're very, very, very security conscious. It's starting to ramp up more in healthcare than it used to be. Healthcare has become a really big target for hackers because of that personal information. Manufacturing is really big. We have a lot of manufacturing customers that want to know that they have this because, do you really want someone taking over your plant and being able to do something with your equipment or, potentially introduce a new threat? Especially when you start going into utility organizations. I've represented a few of them out here in New York over the years of my time here with Tanium. And again, very, very, very security conscious. They wanted all the tools. They wanted to be prepared before anything ever hit.
Yeah. So, speaking of customers doing POCs, things like that, I wonder if there's folks trying to DIY this either themselves in-house or with some open source software or something like that. Do you see people coming to you guys saying, "Look, this just isn't working out," like trying to build this ourselves, and they want to check out your product and see if your product can solve that for them?
Well, that's actually kind of how this came to us, is that we had one customer that said, "Hey, there's this utility out here that, we think we can use, but we have too many endpoints. We got to crawl the file systems. It's incredibly inefficient. Do you guys think you can do anything better?" And, we sat down, again, Garrett sat down and took a look at it, brought me in because of my experience with both index and asset and our inventory management system. And we sat down and wrote the application and said, okay, we can do this at scale and at speed. So when we did our initial POCs, customers were shocked that with 150,000 endpoints around the world, that within a few hours, they can get all the respond information and they can start hunting and finding what they're looking for. And that was really a game changer, because if it was something that you were building one-off, it just imagines individually deploying an application, scanning every machine, collating all of that data, getting it together, and you're a worldwide organization. You have offices all around the planet. It becomes a daunting task.
So challenge accepted.
Yeah, exactly. The next thing that we're really going for, and this is another part of the future project, is customers are now asking us to say, hey, can you build us a bill of materials? Like for a particular application, can you sit down and give me what all of the libraries are? And there's like 3 or 4 different industry standards. And that's what we're starting to also take a look at, is like, okay, now that I have it, I think we're better than a build time tool because of the fact that we can see everything on disk and put together those dependencies and say, yeah, here's everything that you have that can supplement what you're getting from your build time tool.
Right. Source of truth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how Tanium always looked at ourselves, is that we want to be the ultimate source of truth. And then we can feed it to whatever third-party system that you want, or we can just keep it all internally, through our integrations with, other providers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Roland, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been enlightening.
Pleasure being here. And if anybody's got any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Awesome. All right. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk product-led growth and building products in cybersecurity with Ross Haleliuk from LimaCharlie. managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day, invitation-only, executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. That's SECWEEK23. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right. For our next interview, Ross Haleliuk joins us today to talk about product-led growth, about building cybersecurity products. And depending on how the conversation goes, we could go down all sorts of different paths like angel investing, how to build a successful newsletter, what a cyber collective is. This guy does all kinds of cool stuff. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you here. You definitely popped up a lot, I think, on all of our radars with a lot of the work that you do. I started following your newsletter, seeing some of your posts on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has just become this great place for conversation that I think a lot of the conversations I used to have on Twitter, maybe are on LinkedIn or maybe they're different conversations. But yeah, maybe we should start with how you got into security in the first place, because you haven't always been in security, right?
I haven't always been in security. And in fact, I am one of the not too many people who cannot make a statement that I have 20 plus years of experience in the industry. So I have been in product management for quite a long time, probably about 10 plus years. And I have had the chance to work across a number of different industries. So I was in fintech, in e-commerce, retail, wholesale. And then a couple of years ago, a co-founder of LimaCharlie has reached out and was like, hey, this is what we are building, and we would like to have you join as a head of product. And so at the time, my exposure to security has been fairly limited. And what I ended up doing, I had a fantastic conversation with the founder, and then I went home and I started looking into the industry, trying to understand how it functions, what are the different players. And ultimately, after a couple of hours of research, I went back to him and said, you know what, I'm not doing this. This is insane. And so the reason that happened was because, for somebody coming from the outside of the industry, just looking at the space and trying to make sense of all the acronyms, all the abbreviations, all the MDRs, NDRs, XDRs, SIM, source, and on and on and on, was just way too overwhelming. But as you can see, I ended up going back on my decision, and here I am today after a couple of years in the industry. I love the space, and I really, really enjoy being here.
So what was it? Okay, how much money do you need? Like, how did he talk you into it after you were like, heck no?
No, so you see, it wasn't really about money. It was more so that I started looking a bit more into the space, and what I came to realize is that, one, the industry is growing rapidly, and two, as much as I have always seen my background that is, not like, as much as I have seen, the absence of the strong security background a weakness at the time, and there are still cases when, my ability to comprehend a certain technical topic is limited. But I did also see the strength and the advantage of coming from a different space and having a different lenses on product in particular. So it was a bit of it was a process of me convincing myself that, yes, I can do it, and this is interesting. And honestly, I think it has been the best, one of the best decisions in my career.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the chaos is one of the things that I can't speak for Katie or Tyler, but that draws me to it. I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life, in my late 30s. But when I was diagnosed, it made a lot of things clear to me. And yeah, on the market side, things are happening all the time. On the threat side, defense, offense, everything. It's just a never-ending flow of stuff to learn and understand, which is what drew me towards it.
Yeah, there is that, but frankly, I think the other thing that really became apparent to me after some time in the industry is just that the number of people who come into this space for motives other than money is actually much higher than in many other industries. For example, when you work in fintech, like you're primarily running into people who came into fintech because the pay is good and there is a certain size of the market opportunity. But when you work in cybersecurity, you meet people day after day who ended up in security because that's the passion of theirs. That's something like they have that sense of mission, sense of community, sense of purpose, and sense of service that you don't see in many other spaces.
Yeah, mission.
So you
mission
mentioned obviously you came in from the outside to a degree, and you just talked about people coming into the industry because they're mission driven, they're purpose driven. What would you say for you when you were, quote, convincing yourself that this was a good role? What were some of the qualities that you think served you well to come back here? And what do you think are some of the qualities as companies are looking for more diversity and inclusion that they should be looking for? Because I think you make a really great point about sometimes it's actually better to come with an outside perspective because you see something with fresh eyes. You don't know the limitations. You don't know the guardrails. You don't know necessarily, you don't have those those tints on your glasses that would make you say, we shouldn't do this. So what are some of those qualities that helped you succeed and that you see in others that you say, hey, bring those to the industry?
That is a fantastic question, and I think the number one would probably be just having the natural curiosity and the ability to ask questions. And then having the humbleness to admit that, one, you don't know everything, but two, the boundaries of your knowledge are actually much, much more narrow than they are for many other people coming with the domain expertise. So to me, the number one thing that has allowed me to learn and grow a lot over the past couple of years was really just the ability to ask questions and say, hey, you know what, tell me more. And I know, like some people at LimaCharlie make fun of me because that's really the quote that's the phrase I end up saying way too often. Tell me more. Like, hey, I like this part of the product experience is painful. Tell me more. Like, why is it painful? Like, what problem are you trying to solve here? So to me, it's this, frankly, just the ability to ask questions, be transparent about what you know, be transparent about what you don't know, and that really wins people's trust. Like when when people don't try to pretend that they are any deeper into a certain domain area than they actually are.
That's great. I do want to rephrase what you said, and I know it's what you said and it's your thought, but I want to pose it a different way and see if maybe this is true. Because you said you have to admit when you have a narrow set of knowledge. But I think what you meant is that you have a narrow set of knowledge in one area.
Yes, in that specific area. Yeah,
right.
But it's broad across number of different areas and domains. But it's really this beginner's mindset in this specific field. In which case, for me, it was cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think that's important to call out. And the reason I did is because you bring things that somebody who's worked in security their whole life may not. And that could be true for a lot of other people. And since we're such a growing industry and we have so many seats to fill, transferring your knowledge from another industry, from another role within a company could be extremely valuable if you, like you say, are humble enough and inquisitive enough to apply your skills to a different area and accept that you're not going to be the smartest person in the room.
And exactly, and that's okay. And I guess the other thing that I would probably highlight is, what was I about to say? Oh yeah, it's well, so not being the smartest person in the room, but also Yeah, you know what? It just left. One of those things.
It'll come to you at 4 a.m. It's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just another comment on what you guys are talking about. When I became an industry analyst and started to talk to 7-8 vendors a week, and take all these briefings, one of the things I noticed is that they would get kind of trapped in this bubble of their own language, their own messaging, to where, and it's one of the things that I think took you aback when you first looked at the industry. It sounds like, Ross, is communication is so hard here. And I just had to get used to asking all kinds of questions. Like I still remember when I started on to do marketing, and this is years and years ago, my first marketing stint for a startup, and they were talking about POVs, and I'd never heard the proof of value acronym. Like we had always said proof of concept, so it was POCs. And first time I heard that, for the first couple of days, after 2 days, I was like, what are you guys talking about? Because to me, it's point of view. Like every time I hear POV, I'm translating it in my head as point of view. So I had to learn very quickly, like not to be shy about asking questions. And I found out crazy stuff like, terms that you thought were simple, that had simple definitions, like east-west and north-south in terms of networking inside a network architecture or an organization. There are like 5-6 different definitions for north, south, and east, west, depending on who you're talking to. So you have to clarify what you mean when you start using a lot of these terms.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would probably highlight is whoever comes in, like whether they come in from a different industry or even within the same industry, but just move into the different market segment, like they have to have the willingness to put in the work. And like that, nobody can really replace that need, because at the end of the day, like you have to understand what the customer's problems are. You have to understand what like how they're doing their work. You have to understand the dynamics in the industry at the level at which it is necessary for you to do your job. Like if you do product, it's very different than if you're a sales engineer or than if you are a marketer. But in any case, you have to do it. And for me, one of the things, and probably one of the reasons why initially I said no to joining LimaCharlie, was because I don't like doing things halfway. Like in my previous life, when I was in fintech, for example, like 3 months after joining the fintech company that built products for mortgage brokers, I became a licensed mortgage broker. So for me, there was this innate understanding that I want to understand the industry, not just I guess not just horizontally and like what are the different players and how it works, but also vertically. Like how does it look like to underwrite a mortgage from the moment when somebody comes into the doors of the mortgage broker to the moment when somebody walks in with their mortgage approved and their money in the bank account. So, and in the same way, like when I started at LimaCharlie, like I bought like somewhere between like 40 and 60 books, just reading about the space, reading about the industry, like looking at like super technical and less technical areas. Like I did this Security Plus certification, which again, for a cybersecurity professional, it's the level of basics that nobody would even mention. But for me, coming out of the industry, like it was actually quite useful. So there is a lot of that where like you have to put in the work, you have to talk to people, you have to ask questions, and you can't necessarily do it within your like a traditional work week. Like if you're new to the industry, you have to do much more for you to get up to speed quickly.
And you really do sound like you know your stuff. Like I was shocked to find out that you've only been in this industry for a couple of years. And there's a couple of folks I've run into like that just pick it up so quick. They I can't tell them from somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years.
Hey, can I ask a question, Ross? I got a chance to meet you a while back when you interviewed me for a piece on investing in cyber. And your piece was absolutely fantastic. Deep, strong journalistic research. I want to ask, like, you seem to have a very innate ability to get up to speed on a topic very quickly and understand it thoroughly, not just at a surface level, exactly like you described. Is there a certain amount of the way that writing may help you solidify that in your brain? Is that something you think that helps you, kind of that the writing and the creation of content helps you get up to speed on areas faster?
It does. It does. And honestly, I think writing has helped me tremendously well. I am, this might sound super buzzwordy, but I am a big, I'm a big believer in what Jeff Bezos, I think he described it as, nobody can write a 6 or 7 pager about the business problem and not know what they're talking about. That's why, I personally, I do not like slides. I do not like slides, like slide decks. They mean nothing to me. It's just a bunch of numbers and nice pictures. For me, writing is first and foremost the ability to kind of crystallize my own thinking, refine my own thinking, and build that mental model of whatever problem I am looking at. And it's only a secondary that I end up publishing some of the stuff that I actually work on. And really for me, writing didn't start as the desire to just have a blog about cybersecurity. That hasn't been the case. For me, writing is just a byproduct of me being saying, hey, there are some parts of the industry that I don't necessarily get exposure to as a part of, LimaCharlie or as a part of me being at the head of product. But I'm still interested in those areas of the industry. For example, with you, Tyler, we talked about the industry analyst space, which to me, I know a couple of industry analysts, but I don't have, I've never been one. So I don't have that deep understanding of the dynamics and how it functions. What are the different incentive systems? What are the different players in this space? And so a lot of that research I end up just doing on my own, but quite a bit of it comes from conversations with people and asking questions, saying, hey, I don't know how this works, but I want to build that. I want to build that mental model. So writing, 100%. It's a super powerful tool.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's one of the reasons I write the Cyber Why, and I'm sure that's why you write Venture and Security. And I would recommend that everybody, all the listeners, please go subscribe to Venture and Security. You're going to get the pieces that come out are deep tech pieces, better than you find at many, many analyst firms. They're very, very strong pieces. And I felt like a big portion of how you learn, and I can almost see that in the way you work. Follow-on question to that, I do want to dig in for a second on kind of the other projects, right? Because you're here representing LimaCharlie, but you also have the Venture and Security Substack, and you're doing other things as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what your favorite project is, your passion project, maybe?
I feel like they all are at different, in different ways. So I started the blog about a year, I think, just a bit over a year ago, and it ended up growing. It ended up starting as something that I just did, to share some of my research and some of my thinking, and it grew into something that I did not quite anticipate at the beginning. And so after having a couple of thousand people read and seeing the numbers keep growing by a few hundred people almost every week, what I came to understand is I simply cannot stop. So I'm continuing on and on, trying to publish one piece a week, which is my weekend project. And then I have an early morning project too, where I'm a bit crazy that way. I wake up at 6, and then from 7 to 9, it's it's the time when I do something else. And that something else at this point is an Angel Syndicate. So I just announced an Angel Syndicate for cybersecurity practitioners, where the intent is to bring together people working in the industry, primarily as practitioners, and essentially help shape the future of the industry by making bets on the companies, on the early stage cybersecurity startups that are more practitioner focused. And we can talk about the practitioner focused part a bit later, because that will tie into this conversation about PLG. But yeah, I think so. At this point, I'm doing a couple of things. So the Angel Syndicate, really starting to, there is a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of prep work that needs to happen, but anticipating that sometime probably closer to the end of April, the beginning of May, we'll be able to start looking at some early stage companies. At this point, just talking to a bunch of security practitioners. Some of them are from my network, and others who have reached out and say, hey, I want to be a part of it. And then Blog is just it's a weekly ongoing thing. LimaCharlie is the main area of focus, and I am a big a big champion and a big believer into the approach we are taking and what we are trying to do in the industry. And lastly, the other small initiative that I have been trying to get off the ground, and so far the response has been absolutely tremendous, is what I call a building cyber collective, which is really just it's a place where we try to match not really match, but bring together cybersecurity startups, like early stage cybersecurity startups, and people from the industry who are interested in acting as advisors, and let them connect via the double opt-in system. So just to eliminate the potential sales pitch and spam, it's double opt-in. So a startup, for example, can say, hey, Tyler, I see you're an expert in cybersecurity product marketing, or I see you've been an analyst. We really need an advice around this, the question X. Would it be okay to share that advice? Then you will get an email saying, hey, Tyler, this is what they're looking for. Are you interested? If you say yes, a double opt-in email goes out. So it's a very low-key, very low-tech initiative. Again, not purely a community effort. So no money involved whatsoever. Similar to the blog, and so far, we had about 120, 130 advisors join, and then at this point, just a bit over 60 startups. So no expectation, just trying to add value and connect people who may be helpful to one another.
Man, I wish I had your energy. You're seeing these opportunities, you're going after them, and it's and it's all it seems like it's all kind of connected too. And that's what I've noticed with a lot of the things that I do. I do a lot of stuff as well, though I'm not creating some of the cool stuff that you are. Like this podcast is already going.
You are creating. You are creating quite a bit. Not only this podcast, but I remember when we met at the conference, you were talking about some of the research that you were doing into the other side of the industry. So it's quite interesting. You're being too humble.
So, and maybe one more question on while we're talking about creating and being, I guess you could call us creators. That brings up thoughts of people who stream on Twitch and things like that. But enterprise creators, maybe corporate creators. I don't know the right term there. But do you worry about because I'm sure you write blog posts and things like that for LimaCharlie also. Now that I've started a new role and I'm going to be responsible for creating a lot of content, how do you worry about that creative well going dry, or have you is there anything that you do to kind of reset your brain, and keep those ideas flowing, or is that just not an issue that you have?
Honestly, what I found is, one, I think my biggest challenge has been not so much the creative well. My biggest challenge has been compartmentalizing things. So you see, I lead product at LimaCharlie, and so obviously I would like LimaCharlie to succeed. However, I have to try really hard to make sure that doesn't overflow into my content, because it's entirely separate. It's my weekend project. I don't write about LimaCharlie. I don't inject it whether it's necessary or not, just because I work there. So it's those, frankly, I think that managing, keeping those mental lines around the potential conflict of interest and just advocating for something and being biased, I think that has been much harder than as you've said, the creative part. Regarding creativity, I think a lot of it comes down to the discipline, much more so than just being creative. And I'm curious if Tyler can relate, because his CyberWire newsletter has been one of the things that I read weekly. And unlike Tyler, I don't actually release Venture in Security on a certain day. So I sometimes give myself a flexibility of saying, hey, you know what, next week I will do it on Wednesday versus Monday, and so I still have those extra few evenings where I can do some tweaks and stuff. But Tyler is being from what I've observed is being very precise, and he releases CyberWire on Friday, and so there is much more discipline that probably goes into his writing.
I wish I could say it was more disciplined. I definitely have once or twice in the last handful of months had it slip to a Sunday or even a Monday. But in general, I try to release every Friday. But for me, it's interesting. One thing that caught my ear, and I know we're kind of on a weird topic for this podcast, but I'm going to keep going. One thing that caught my ear is how you like to compartmentalize. I'm the opposite. I want all of my projects to actually tie together, and in an ideal world, leverage additional value as we go through each thing. So, for example, I have to be careful what I say here from an investment vantage point, but if I have certain ideas from an investment vantage point, I might research them and write them publicly in my thoughts on Cyber Y as I'm trying to research kind of where I want to put money from an investment vantage point. So there's lots of different ways you can tie it in or not tie it in. For me, I like to keep everything super interconnected.
Interesting. So, see, for me, I think I see where you're coming from, and frankly, I think when I say compartmentalize, I probably use the wrong word. Like, it's more so about like managing that potential conflict of interest between different things I'm doing. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, for me, it has primarily been around the business side of the industry, the investment side of the industry, the product. And then having this more of a practitioner focus that really tie into what we do at LimaCharlie. It ties into like how we build product at LimaCharlie. It ties into like a lot of the topics that I end up researching and writing about. Because, you know, like if you like, let's just say if you're a VC, you probably know quite a bit about the space of industry analysts. But if you're a security practitioner, you might not even suspect that they exist, or you might have your own assumptions about, you know, like to what degree they're objective and so on. So there is that tie-in, there is that commonality and like the common underlying foundation, but there is the complexity around like, hey, you know, this is the blog, like I'm looking at the future of the industry, and you know, even though like, for example, something we do at LimaCharlie, it might very well tie in, but I'm not just going to like, I whenever possible, and whenever it makes sense, I also make a disclaimer saying that, hey, like this part might not exactly be objective because like I believe it and I live it at my work. So there is that's more what I meant.
Gotcha. Yeah, so let's move on to product-led growth. You know, it's definitely you know, speaking of writing and content, you know, there's been a lot out there in the last couple of years. You know, certainly recently. You know, I know on CyberY, I very much enjoyed the. You know, there's I think Tyler, you posted yours first, and then you posted somebody wrote a retort to it, or was it the other way around? But
no, I posted mine first, and then Steve LaChance contacted me because he was the one that inspired the original post about how PLG doesn't fit for cyber, and he said, "Hey, I want to clap back on that," and I said, "Sounds awesome. Let's see if we can do a debate piece." And so he actually wrote the second piece.
Nice. Yeah, I would love. No,
yeah, for listeners, let's just let's define it. You know, like make it sense for folks who aren't familiar with product-led growth, and just start there.
So how about I offer something else? How about we talk about it? Like we talk about, like, I'm super happy to talk about the way I see it without using the word product-led growth or words PLG or any sort of, you know, marketing or product terms whatsoever. And then, because you see, like my complexity is that any conversation around PLG can get out of hand super quickly. So if we can have a more of a high-level conversation, it might get easier.
Yeah, no, let's do it. Did you want to start off, or you want me to start? Okay,
I'm happy to. Yeah. So when I I guess before talking about the specific go-to-market strategy, let me just state a couple of observations that I have made about the industry, and then we can quickly discuss those and challenge some of them if makes sense, and from there talk about the go-to-market. So I see several things. One, I see that the number of cybersecurity vendors is rapidly growing. I see that CISOs are overwhelmed with the number of vendors, with the number of startups trying to compete for their attention and trying to get them into a demo. I also see that CISOs, and I recognize that CISOs were not hired to shop for tools. Like their job is to build the company's security strategy, work on the stakeholder alignment, like work with boards, with executive teams, like build teams and so on and so forth. I also see that more and more security practitioners are starting to spend time like playing with tools, setting up different security tooling in their home labs, trying what's out there, seeing what's active, like staying active in the community and so on. And I also see that more and more CISOs are, at least in some of the conversations I had, are saying that they tend to take recommendations for new tooling from their teams. So, for example, a security practitioner coming in and saying, "Hey, Adrian, I know we are looking for X to solve a specific problem in our company. So I've been playing with this tool, and it seems to do what we need. How about we take a look?" So that's really like those are some of the observations that I have seen, and I wonder, like, from your perspective, would you say that they're true, or are some of them that raise a red flag, and we want to kind of dig deeper into?
Yeah, so let me talk about it from a buyer's perspective, because I was a buyer for a long time, and just come at it from the total opposite end of it, and what I was seeing. So one of the biggest reasons we were buying stuff, I started my career at a large payment processor, and I was there when PCI came out. So obviously PCI forced us to do a bunch of things that we may not have been doing already. So we needed to buy some tools. We needed to do a lot of work to get into compliance with those. I think it was like 250 requirements then. Now it's more than 300 requirements. And, it would take, I remember shopping for a SIM, and it would take 3 or 4 sales calls before I'd see a demo, before I'd ever even see the product. It would take another 3 or 4 sales calls before we could get a proof of concept of the product. I remember we did a shootout between 4 different SIM products, and they sent sales engineers on site to set up these proof of concepts. We gave each of them 5 days. Only one of them worked at all, like up and operational, and we could actually log into it after those 5 days. And that's the one we ended up buying. We didn't buy it because it was great. We bought it because it was the only one that worked. Their own SEs, their own sales engineers, were not able to get the other 3 products from those other 3 vendors even functional. And this is back 2004, 2005. But I still see that today, where you're just required to do so much work, and too often at the end of all that work to see the product, to test out the product, it's just underwhelming. It's like, why is this hidden, behind so much secrecy? Why is there so much friction, just to figure out if I'm wasting my time, and then on the sales and marketing side, it's just, the SDRs, I don't know if any SDRs enjoy what they do, but, for me, receiving cold calls and emails and LinkedIn stuff, like it's unwanted. It's painful. It seems painful for them as well, because they're hearing no all day long, just trying to get their quota of meetings set up, and sometimes people just give in, just to make people stop calling, to make people stop emailing. They don't even want the product. They're not a qualified lead. They just want the pain to stop. So when I became aware of like the product-led growth, the first big thing I saw with that was Linux, right? Linux was just anybody could go use it. You could figure out what it was good for, what it wasn't good for, and it just made me think, like, why would anybody do it any other way?
Yeah. No, 100%. And frankly, this is precisely the reason why, like, I wanted for us to start the conversation by just looking at the fundamentals, like what we see in the industry. And to me, the reason it is important is because normally when you hear the word PLG, it's technically like it's always somebody who just comes in and says, oh my God, there is that new big thing. Like, look, like the Silicon Valley is buzzing around PLG. How about we implement it in our company? And then there goes this entirely unreasonable and frankly quite dumb directive somewhere from the top saying, hey, marketing people, product people, let's make our company PLG. And to me, this is where, and this is, this is where, like, I do agree with Tyler that there are quite a few companies that are not going to be suitable for it. And so for me, the company that wants to, again, let's push, let's once again push PLG aside. So what can a reasonable and a well-run company do in the conditions we've just described, where the market fundamentals are that, for startups, getting CISOs into a call is hard, and frankly, it's not a viable strategy. And if product can appeal to practitioners, there is potentially a way they can sell it, to their management and kick off the more traditional sales process that way. So in my mind, the reasonable company would start by understanding their customers, understanding who are they, what do they care about, where do they hang out, understanding the buying process. How do they buy? Who is involved in those decisions? How do different sides contribute to that process? What influence do they have? And if understanding if somebody in that buying process has a strong opinion about technology. Is there somebody that has built a habit of potentially evaluating different tools, or maybe somebody who can build that habit if they don't have if they don't yet have it? Like, what are the different incentives that come into play? So for me, all of those questions, they are important because they inform a company, they inform the strategy, and they make it clear what is possible and what's not possible. Like, for example, if a person evaluating the security product is a compliance manager, it's less likely that they will go out and try a new tool because there is less culture of doing so than there is, for example, if you look at the security architect who literally can live in the open source world. Or if a hypothetical buyer is a developer, would they buy a security product? Well, it sounds theoretically possible because they're the ones, or they're looking at different technical solutions. But developers, they don't want to do security; they want to code. So the developer is not going to go out of their way to find a great security product. Sometimes they do, but in most cases they don't. So to me, the fundamental challenge with PLG is somebody comes in and says, okay, you know what, there is this big thing, let's become PLG because we want everybody to sign up, to put in their credit card and start paying. But fundamentally, that's not how security products are purchased today, and that's not how they will be purchased. Nobody is going to take an endpoint solution and deploy it across 100,000 endpoints, because it's not how security products are purchased. There is a high reliance on trust. You have to know what the product does. You have to know how the product is built. You have to know, you have to have a level of certainty that the company is going to be around tomorrow. There's just too many things that come into play. So when I think about PLG in the context of cybersecurity, and now I'm happy to reintroduce that term back, I think about being practitioner focused and looking for ways to make it easier for people to try what you do. However, not everybody can accomplish it, and that's okay. So not everybody should be trying to strive for it. That's some of my thinking, but I have much more on that topic.
Yeah.
So to me, what you're describing is very akin to persona-based marketing, right? So you have to know your customer, you have to know some data around them, not just who they are, but where they are, what their habits are, what the typical type of buyer, what they like, what they don't like. So does that mean with a good product-led growth initiative that you have to almost have different experiences, whether that's a product tour or a demo or whatever the case may be? Does that mean that you have to have multiple ones of those? Because most companies don't have one single persona who's their buyer.
I guess that's one of the ways we can talk about it. And I don't again, I think even without bringing the buzzword, the PLG buzzword into the conversation, in my mind, from my experience, it is reasonable to say that, hey, different types, different people discover our product in different ways. So let's find a way to get in front of them. For some, let's just say, maybe one of the personas who could potentially benefit from our product is a security engineer, or is somebody who is more likely to try and see what the tool does. Well, then the question becomes, how do we get in front of them? Maybe there's some CTF competitions we can expose our bet at, or maybe there are some practitioner-focused training events that we can do. So the one thing that is not going to work, and whether we are talking about cybersecurity or any other industry, is just building a cool product, creating a self-sign-up flow, and just hoping that somebody will start flocking into the product and adopting it. To your point, what are the other types of people who could adopt what we do? How can they get exposed to it? How can the leadership get exposed to what we do? There is a different channel, and so I guess the concept of the persona-based marketing does tie into the overall conversation about how do we grow the business. And to me, that's the number one thing that people need to answer. Not how do we become PLG, but what works for our specific industry, what works for our specific market segment, and how do we do more of what works and don't do the stuff that doesn't? It sounds very basic, but so many companies you see, read some articles saying PLG is great, and they jump into it. They get they fire their marketing department, they reshape their sales team, they bring somebody else in, and it's why are you doing this? Why don't you start by understanding what can work for you?
And I feel like there's another ingredient here that I've seen, at least in examples of people who do PLG well, and it's not PLG specific, but if you're going to go the PLG route, you have to do these things well. Your product, or at least, for it to work well for you, your product has to be easy to implement. It has to be fairly easy to use. It's got to be if you think of a consumer product, the amount that people will rip to shreds a $5 app in the App Store versus what people are willing to put up with $1 million appliance or enterprise SaaS service is amazing to me. There's just absolutely no patience for a product that isn't well polished, with consumer facing stuff. The budgets are different. The economics are different. But then you see somebody spend $1 million on something and it doesn't even work, and it's just that's 4 out of 10 things that they buy, it seems.
Yeah, no, I have been looking a lot at the question around product management in general in cybersecurity. Even if you don't look at the PLG, cybersecurity, I'm not going to say that cybersecurity is the only industry that has some unique characteristics, because that is not the case. If you look at biotech, if you look at defense, if you look at automotive, every industry functions a bit differently. It has some unique characteristics, but so does cybersecurity. And so in cybersecurity, the different types of customers have entirely different needs. So in some spaces, for example, in many industries, what defines an enterprise version of the product versus the SMB versus the product for the personal use is the presence of, access management, SSO for better or for worse, maybe access to the audit logs and access to the API. In cybersecurity, on the other hand, what a regular person needs versus what the SMB needs versus what an enterprise needs are entirely 3 different things. And so you have those differences. Most of cybersecurity is enterprise sales. Most of the products are inherently hard to evaluate. The degree to which buying a product relies on trust is much higher than it is in many other spaces, because not only it is hard to empirically evaluate what the tool does today, but also you have to take a leap of faith that this tool is going to be there tomorrow against an entirely unknown threat that you cannot even forecast the existence of today. So there are many ways in which cybersecurity is a fairly unique space, and companies trying to define a go-to-market strategy, they have to account for it. Like whether they're trying to take a PLG route or not, it's just like the fundamentals of understanding your market and understanding the customer.
Yeah, so, Tyler, I'd love to get your thoughts here, but I feel like a lot of, and you too, Katie, a lot of what we're talking about isn't necessarily specific to product-led growth. Like a lot of the stuff we've talked about, understanding your ICP, the personas, who you're selling to, what they actually need, understanding the customer, like that's just important, period. Whether you want to build a large outbound sales and marketing program or have none of that and do entirely PLG, like I feel like a lot of the qualities we're talking about are just things that you need to do. Like you need to fundamentally build a good product that's easy to use, isn't terribly buggy and is easy for people to get up and working with. And also just understanding what the product is. As an industry analyst, I can't tell you how excited I would get sometimes when I could find a screenshot of the product. Like best day ever. If I can find a screenshot of the product, I can better understand what it does. And for some companies, it's incredibly hard. Like forget a demo, forget freemium or like actually running it in my environment. Just seeing a screenshot of what the UI looks like is a huge challenge for some of these companies for me.
Sorry, I coughed right into that ending. I totally agree with you. I think all in all, if we look at the bulk of the startup, small to mid-sized businesses in cybersecurity, most of them are two people in a garage, right? Two tech people with a great idea, get some seed funding because there's so much money sloshing around. Still, even in the downturn, there's so much money sloshing around cyber that they come up with an idea, they create a little bit of traction and get themselves a bunch of money, and then they say, okay, great, now what's our market? What's our position? What's our message? How do we do the GTM? Vast majority of the younger companies I talk to have no idea how to build a go-to-market. They just don't. It's just not something they've been product people their whole lives. Their previous CISOs now creating a product, and they just don't understand how to build the business. And I think it's a massive gap in our market. And I don't know if that's unique to our market or if that's high tech, high growth in a general sense of the word. But there's definitely a gap for that type of skill set. It's one of the skill sets that my firm tends to bring to the table for those younger companies is that go-to-market experience.
I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head, and I think the misconception of product-led marketing is that, oh, you just let the product speak for itself. That's not what product-led growth is. That's not what it means. You have to have an understanding of your market and how to reach people. But the reality is now versus 10 years or 20 years ago, people are spending months ahead of time doing their own research before they want to talk to a salesperson. I used to be in sales and you could actually call people and you'd get people on the phone. I don't think you can do that anymore. Nobody wants to talk on the phone. Sending emails is not super effective. I know when we get emails within our company for people soliciting us, that sometimes people will post them and make jokes about just how bad they are because it's a spray and pray approach. And if you can't understand marketing, if you can't understand targeting, if you can't understand what your position in the market is and your product differentiation, your product isn't going to speak for itself, and your sales tactics, no matter what they are not going to work. So you have to be smart about marketing, and you can't just say, well, we're going to build it and they will come. This is not Field of Dreams. That's not how it works. You have to be really smart and systematic about how you go through building that product-led growth marketing plan, because it's not just, here, try my product. And I think that's a huge misunderstanding. I can't talk about other industries. I'm sure it's that way too, but a huge misunderstanding, especially in the cybersecurity industry. And Adrian, to something you said, screenshots go a long way. Everybody's so keen on getting these great websites with cool graphics that they forget that when people are doing research, they need to be able to differentiate for themselves. They don't want to have to read through buzzwords. They don't want to have to guesstimate on what you're doing. They want to be able to see it. And you're not giving away your secret sauce if you're more clear. I know there's SEO. I know there's analyst coverage, but you're not giving away your secret sauce, your intellectual property, if you're clear on what your product does without the buzzwords.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And frankly, like I have, I can talk a lot about this whole concept that I discuss quite often, and I wrote a bunch of blog articles at Venture in Security. It's about the idea of moving from the promise-based into the evidence-based security. Where there was a time when a company would come into the vendor and say, "Hey, vendor, I need something to make me safe." And then the vendor would sell this amazing product where they press the red button, it activates Shield, and now they're good. Now they're safe. Like fast forward into 2023, we know that is not how security works. And having the products, having the components that play well with others, that can be evaluated, can be tested, can be assessed, can function like in the way that's interoperable and can be integrated with other tooling is important. So to me, I like, again, I don't necessarily think, I'm not I'm a product guy, and as a very pragmatic person who does a lot of also work with early stage startups. And by the way, I absolutely agree with you, Tyler, around the typical cybersecurity founder persona, but I do see a lot of this too, and the idea that PLG is amazing is very appealing to people who think that, well, we can just keep building and then the customers will just come because we've got the new cool technology. And unfortunately, that is not the case. And companies companies that are looking to succeed, companies that are looking to grow and build a sustainable go-to-market strategy, like have to look at what works, have to try different things and look at what works. Making the product accessible is a great idea. Making the product easy to try is a great idea. But at the end of the day, they're in it to build a company, to build a solution to the problem, and to build a business on top of that solution, so that they can continue solving other problems that are adjacent to what they started with. And unless they build that sustainable go-to-market strategy, whether it's through PLG or whether it's not through PLG, if it is more suitable for their specific market, like they won't be able to sustain themselves.
Yeah, Go ahead, Ross.
Sorry. Yeah, I know that initially, like if you look from the outside, like somebody like coming with the head of product title and with the product hat, like you probably naturally and also I do talk a lot about PLG. Like I wrote like 7 or 8 or even more posts about it. Like you probably naturally expect me to be like, hey, you know what? Forget about everything. Here is PLG. But I'm a much more reasonable human than that.
So, in the vein of things that work for everyone, as we wrap up here, Ross, where would you point people to get those fundamentals? I mean, you've already thrown out some great tips, making it easier for people to learn about your product, stuff that seems obvious, but apparently has to be said. But other than your blog is obviously a good source for a lot of this stuff. Or your newsletter, which you can read as a blog. That's the thing I love about newsletters now is it's flexible. But where would you point people to for those fundamentals?
I mean, frankly, I don't think there there isn't a lot about specifically PLG in cybersecurity. I mean, there is enough, but a lot of it has some agenda behind it, and people trying to either sell a certification or sell a course. I think fundamentally, there's some like basics of product management that are useful. There's some great books. What comes to mind? Oh, I feel like I've been reading just so much that I'm having trouble just shortlisting a certain book. There is a lot. I think there is an institution called like either Product Led Alliance or something similar, like productled.org or productled.com. They have a lot of materials around metrics and around like the approach itself. But fundamentally, like honestly, I think picking up any book about the go-to-market strategy is great. Like I like obviously Awesome. It's a fantastic book about positioning in general, like incredibly useful. In the context of product, there's so many YouTube videos where there are institutions such as Product School that put in a lot of content. Reforge, which is like a Silicon Valley based, like a boot camp and school run by practitioners. There is a lot, and frankly, I think what's even more useful than reading books is trying and seeing what works, and like being very methodical about it.
Always be A/B testing. Right?
Yeah. It's hard. Like, it's hard to A/B test when you're at an early stage, because frankly, if you have like 100 people visiting your website, like, what can you even test?
Enough. Yeah.
But like, talking to your peers, seeing what has worked, and talking to people outside of those like shiny great conferences and events where everybody comes in with a great slide deck and says how awesome everything is and how we've implemented this fantastic framework. Because what many people will find is, if they catch speakers in a more of a private setting and ask them, hey, how did this really go? The story is going to be quite different. So it's being able to understand that there are no silver bullets, and the vast majority of the companies that are successful, they were successful because they were trying different things. They were doubling down on what works, cutting losses, and not doing the stuff that doesn't. And none of them were hopeful. Like, all of them were looking for some evidence that a certain approach works. And sometimes you have to be persistent enough before you can see the results. But that's why there is no science, and that's why the go-to-market strategy is such a fascinating area. And that's why people like that's why I know I will have a job in this industry or in any other with ChatGPT or any other advances. Like, you still need to figure out how to bring the product to market, and it's both an art and a science.
Wonderful. Well, Ross, you are obviously awesome, and thank you for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been a really fun chat.
Thank you so much. Thanks, team.
All right, we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News. Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automation. Take your engagements further by pairing with our red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at www.securityweekly.com/core security. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. We would like to invite our listeners to be part of the 2023 SC Awards. Our prestigious and competitive SC Awards program recognizes outstanding innovations, organizations, and leaders that are advancing the practice of information security. This year, there are awards in 36 categories up for grabs, including the Best IT Security-Related Training Program, Innovator of the Year, Best SASE Solution, and more. We'd love to see your company in the spotlight. Visit securityweekly.com/SC Awards to submit your entries by March 13th. That's coming up soon.
Adrian, I would like to formally submit you for Podcast Host of the Year.
I wonder if there's a category for that. We're going to have to...
100%. I will nominate you, and I will ask for everyone in the audience to go to your favorite Reddit channel, go to your favorite Slack channel, and let's make a campaign for Adrian for Cybersecurity Podcaster of the Year, because that's how awesome he is.
Thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome, my friend.
There are podcast awards. I actually have an email in my inbox. I just started following a newsletter that's all about podcasting, podcast technology, podcast software, trends in podcasting, and all that. They call them the Ambies.
Let's get you nominated, my guy.
It's not just podcasting. It's the awards for excellence in audio. So I imagine like audiobooks, the voice talent who read audiobooks and stuff like that would probably be part of that. But yeah, I guess I'm a professional now, so I need to I need to start learning about this whole audio professional industry.
You need to work on your smooth, silky voice, Adrian.
Yeah, and my accent and stuff. I would love to read audiobooks. I loved reading books to my kids at night. I've always wanted to do that, right? So write some kids' books and do the audio. Anything longer than that, I don't know if I could sit down and read like a 1,000-page book, the audio version. I'd figure out.
I do not like them. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Adrian.
All right, let's
get to the real news. Come
on. All right. Not a ton of funding this week. I added one at the last minute here. We have 3 at 20 million. Kato Security raised 20 million. Revelstoke raised 20 million. And Oligo Security raised 20 million, but not all at the same series.
Oh,
some of them are A, some of them are B. Yeah. I'm not sure which one Kato is. Is that a B? I'm not sure that it says.
It's been around a while. That'll be at least a B. They've been around a hot minute.
People are nervous because I think some of these might be down rounds, and they don't want people to make that connection necessarily. That's my theory here.
That wouldn't surprise me.
The one says bringing the company's total investment to 31.5. So it's definitely not their first go around. And they've been around for a while.
Yeah, it could be seed. You could have seed that large.
Cato looks like they took a B in on March 9th. So Cato is a B, $20 million B led by Eurazeo.
So we got 2 Bs and an A. Oligo Security has the big round out of the 3 here. And that's an Israeli startup. And looks like library level security. Speaking of SBOM and knowing what's going on with your libraries, it looks
that
like
is the hotness right now. This whole AppSec reinvention library level SBOM market. It's a super hot. I've probably seen at least 6 or 7 pitches in the last 3 months on that market alone, and all with a very very similar storyline that's not very differentiated and really is going to struggle to stand up against the rest of the AppSec, broader AppSec solution, that whole stack. They're going to have to figure out how they do it different or better than the traditional way.
Well, unlike some of these other categories that we've seen that are kind of theoretical, this is something that attackers are absolutely going after. They're putting backdoors in NPM packages and stuff like that. They absolutely realize that there's an opportunity here to hack into an MSSP or into some kind of supply chain component and get more bang for their buck. Why? Yeah. Why take a path that only gives you access to one enterprise when you can get access to 100 or 1,000?
Yeah, the thing about this is, though, it's actually not a new thing. Like, I remember when I was at Veracode 10 years ago, 10 years plus at this point. Like, we were talking about, I don't remember what we called it, certified pre-owned software, I think we called it. Basically, you're using some kind of open source or embedding something into yours, and that transitive trust occurs, right? That's not new. What's new is that people are actually actively trying to fix the problem because it's becoming a more common occurrence. That's all. Go ahead, Katie. I didn't mean to jump on you there.
No, this is actually a good follow-up to that too. My question here in this space is, this isn't new, and this is a capability that certain vendors have or could have had years ago. So who's going to be the winners here? These new companies coming in and taking advantage of a good opportunity, or the companies that have been around and been maybe a little negligent on this for a while, but who have the base for building this?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch because as long as the technology disruption and innovation is there, they can disrupt the software composition analysis market. If they're not innovative enough, if they're not doing anything truly different, and they just come across as a brand new way of doing SCA from a value proposition standpoint, they won't disrupt the market. And really, it's about understanding the fidelity of what's in your application, what goes into it and what comes out of it, right? And that's not an easy thing to solve. It's about making sure that every ingredient in the recipe is secure, as we were talking about at the top of the hour, or the top of the show.
So Revelstoke. Do you guys know what Revelstoke is?
Nope.
What they do? They are the first SOAR platform built on a unified data layer. I don't know what that means.
Okay. Okay. The first SOAR platform built on a unified data layer. Oh, well, good for them. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, is that true?
Apparently, they're saying it acts like a Rosetta Stone. I think they're saying that somehow they can avoid having to build parsers. They've built some kind of technology that allows them to integrate, because SOAR is only as good as your integrations, right? If this alert pops up here, then go to this system here and do X. So yeah. I mean, clearly that's the pain point of any SIM or SOAR. In fact, I remember Elastica, which was acquired by Blue Coat, which was acquired by Symantec, had some IP on this, built some technology where they were trying to automate the process of building new integrations. Where they were trying to, I don't know if they called it, if they used ML or AI or anything like that, but they would try to automatically scan a website, and figure out the structure of it. So not for a SOAR or a SIM use case, they were a CASB, but because their CASBs would break anytime the website would break. If Salesforce made a change to where a button was, or how something's organized from a UX perspective, these reverse proxy CASBs would break. They're trying to build something to automate this. So maybe they're trying to do something like that, but I think that's a huge one there. Like, I'm sure you guys encounter it or did when you were at Jupiter One and at Exonius, because another business that's built on all the integrations, and you've got to justify The effort into building. You don't want to build an integration for one customer and only one customer ever uses it.
Yeah. And I have a few different ideas around that topic of kind of this unified data lake connector kind of thing. But they're not, really what it is they're pulling together, just like anybody else, a bunch of integrations into your infrastructure, be it your security tooling or your infrastructure tooling, to the APIs of those systems, and pulling in the appropriate data and doing a correlation of a higher level analyzed result that you can't get from any individual tool in isolation. That's what the play is. It's the same play Jupiter One has, same play Axonius has, same play. Literally, I can count dozens of vendors that are doing the same thing. They just all have a different view on what the value prop that comes out of it is, right? In this particular case, it's a SOAR. In other particular case, it's incident response platform. I've seen identity-based cybersecurity done via this way. It's the collection of lots of data. Now they're going to run into the same scale problem as everybody else, and that is those integrations take time and energy to maintain and develop and build up. But I think you've got a good point, Adrian, there, that kind of unified middleware might make a really good company at this stage.
Well, honestly, that's what Tines is doing. They basically have a no-code integration builder. Looking at how you connect APIs with Tines, like you do need to know the API endpoints, and you need to input some information about those endpoints, and you're telling it, okay, put this there, connect these two different things, but you don't have to write any code to do it. You can.
Well, the harder part is the output format. So connecting up to the API and pulling the data is one thing, but what's the unified output format that is normalized so that it is a usable data format for anybody that wants to build on top of it? And I've got a few ideas on that too, but I don't want to get too deep into that.
Go ahead, Katie. Were you trying to say something?
No, I was just nodding along. I think I was saying before, one of the issues I take with this wording is, being the first, maybe the first in that space. I think their concept is good. Do I think it's unique? I don't necessarily think that is the case. But I think it's necessary, absolutely necessary. But that's all.
You're going to love the Cato press release, because they are the first cloud forensics and incident response platform.
Yeah.
Everybody's the
Once
first.
Once again, is that true?
You get a.
Is that really true? I don't know. I mean also,
it's definitely
what benefit. I know that companies take some sort of solace in saying we're the first at this, but how far does that actually go? Because being the first only matters if you're also the best, and best is always relative. And one of the things that I learned when I was an analyst is never say first, best, unique. There's one more I can't remember right now because I'm on my soapbox, but companies who rely on that wording, they need to back it up. And secondly, anytime you think of the first product released in any space, anywhere, like let's take cars, for example. What good would it do now for some company to say, we are the first car who has automatic brakes, or anti-lock brakes, or whatever it is.
Well, automatic brakes are a thing now,
because every car now has anti-lock brakes. Every car that's made now has anti-lock brakes. So does your market actually care when you say, hey, I was the first? Right. And also, if you are the first to build a product, you're the first version. We all know that versions get improvements. That's why there are versions. That's why no company stays at V1 for very long. So this first is really, I think it hurts companies more than it helps companies. And I also think when they say only, they're just pinning a target on their backs, because it's really only a matter of time until somebody else does exactly what they do, maybe in a different way, but the output is the same. And from a buyer's point of view, if you're going here, does it matter if you start here and go here, or if you start here and go here? Maybe, maybe not. And so saying first, only, or best, that's, I just don't know if it helps you in your marketing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has in the past in the auto industry. Like there's Audi's, Quattro system was real big. They won a bunch of World Rally Championship races with it. When nobody else was using all-wheel drive, and you'd see it badged on the car. Graphics on the side of the car. And eventually, like you don't see that anymore. Audi's more of a luxury vehicle now. Less of a connection to rally stuff in their marketing. But Subaru stuck with it. Subaru's still very leans heavily on their all-wheel drive. The fact that most of their cars have all-wheel drive. So I don't know if that transfers over to security. But like if you do something really well, if that's part of your DNA. And to your point, Katie, I don't care if you've done it first. Like, do you do it really well? I care more about whether you do it really well than if you're the first or the fifth or the 12th, right?
Exactly. Because there are going to be iterations of anything that your company does or that your product category does. So best, is it subjective? Yes. But if you have an argument for that and you can demonstrate that, okay. I'm all right with that. You need to be able to back it up, and I'm okay with that. But first, it's kind of meaningless. In my head, I think, maybe I don't want to try the first iteration of a product. Maybe I want them to work out the bugs a little bit. So is that helping or hurting? It depends on who your buyer is. Know your buyer, know your market.
Yep. All right, let's move on. It's too easy to rant about press releases. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Number 7, Cyber Fortress. This is pretty cool. This is a Polish team has come up with a board game. There's a PDF here at this link. I couldn't actually link directly to this one entry. It's just how the first website is set up. But there's a PDF of the slides. It goes through how the game works and stuff like that. And honestly, I hadn't gotten real excited about cybersecurity card deck games and stuff like that, mostly because I haven't had an opportunity to play them. But at Sonil Yu's Cyber Defense Matrix conference, everybody got a copy of this game, and it's a game that you can't buy. You can only get it directly from the vendor here, which is having trouble with my camera, Cycraft, called Cybercans, and it's basically like Monopoly, but as a CISO, you're buying different security technologies, and you roll the dice, you move around the board. If you land on an attack, then you have to defend against that attack, and depending on what technologies you have, you roll for different things, and it's a lot of fun, and it translates pretty well, because it obviously throws in that element of chance and risk. As with regards to how you're going to fare during an attack, and I think you can have some really good conversations around this. My table at the conference, we were supposed to start doing birds of the feather type stuff, and we just ignored it because we were having so much fun playing the game, and we were just devoted to it. Everybody had their budget; it's got a little money in it, just like Monopoly. I was really impressed with it. They actually hired experienced board game makers to make the game, and gave them the parameters for making it. So this the one that I've linked to here seems pretty cool and a bit more accessible too. Since this one you can't buy, but this one they show you all the details of how it works. I don't know how much, how excited you guys are to talk about the U.S. cybersecurity strategy. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the document, and for me, it's mostly highlighting stuff that's already going on. But I linked to a bunch of different articles here, different people's takes. People read it and took different things from it depending on their backgrounds. But I don't have a lot to say about it at this point, except it's a good update. And I think there's some really good stuff going on, especially between CISA and MITRE. I think there's a lot of good collaboration between public and private industry.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Adrian. I struggled to stay awake in that tome of reading. It's just too dense, too long, too govy. It's just not my jam.
There's a lot of back patting, self-congratulation in it, and there's they make sure to tell you Russia's bad and China's bad and DPRK is bad. You can tell it's written by committee, right? Like somebody said, "Hey, here's a blurb of text that has to go in there," and they just copied and pasted it right in. So, more interesting to me, if it wasn't blatantly obvious, is some of the AI stuff going on. And a lot of it's the thinking around it. So, I've used ChatGPT a little bit, not enough that I can get what I really want out of it, even 10% of the time. Like I'm just, kind of struggling with how to work it at this point. But there's some really interesting essays out there. And honestly, Mark Andreessen has a couple essays out about it. The first big one that he released was why AI won't cause unemployment, which I don't even think needs to be said. Sure, there's people out there, that have always shouted about any new technological advancement that automates something that was previously done manually. And of course, we've never seen it. I think famously, in Time magazine or something like that, somebody predicted that we would have 20-hour work weeks by the year 2000 or 2010 or 2020 or something like that, and it's clearly not going to happen. So the more interesting one, I think, is Daniel Meisler's article here, how AI is eating the software world, which is ironic because the title of it is a play on Mark Andreessen's famous essay from 2010, I think, about software eating the world, and I think it's the better article.
100%, it's the better article. Not even remotely close. I've known Daniel for a while, and he writes a lot of great stuff. And I recently said, and I think I said this to you, Adrian, on Slack, that could be one of those seminal posts that you go back and read it in 15, 20 years, and you're like, holy cow, this guy knew exactly where everything was going. And you never know in the moment, right? You didn't know, Andreessen didn't know when he wrote Software is Eating the World that he was right. He thought he was right. He was fairly confident he was right, or he wouldn't have written it, right? But looking back 20 years later after that thing came out, you realize just how right he was. I think Daniel's paper is of that potential magnitude over time. If you read one post today on here, that's the one that I would say you have to read.
I agree. And it's the reason it's a valuable post, and it's a long read. It's a 15-minute read. The reason I think it's so valuable is Daniel breaks it down. He gives you a framework that you can use to apply to AI things to understand where the value is and how to get value out of AI in this current form, the generative AI particularly. And he gives you a bunch of examples. Always like I think stuff like this is so hard to understand without examples. And like one of his examples he uses is write a romantic poem from Luke to Leia in the style of Shakespeare. And he points out like understand, and I think he's even being conservative here with the number of non-trivial subjects that ChatGPT has to understand to be able to do this, which it does really well. It's got to understand the English language, how poets write, how Shakespeare specifically writes, Star Wars, the fact that Luke and Leia are siblings, and the concept of forbidden love. And I would go even beyond that. And the fact that it, like just saying Luke and Leia, that it understands, like you can be that vague, and it understands the context behind that because it understands pop culture.
You know what, the most important thing that you said there, it's actually only one word that matters. Out of everything you just said, the only word that matters is understands, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about a trivial level of pulling stuff off the internet and regurgitating it. There's some comprehension level that has to occur to understand that Luke and Leia were siblings, that there's, the forbidden love aspect. There's that it was a movie. Like, it's not just pulling one-liners off and gluing them together. There's a depth of understanding that has to happen for that level of writing to occur. And I think that's the point of Daniel's essay, is that we have created, finally, a system that understands. And that's why, fundamentally, sure, it may not understand everything at this point, but we know how to make the computer understand context. And that's the difference between sentience and non-sentience.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so this weekend it was actually listening to the All In podcast. Something somebody said on there fired me up, and I started writing my next post for the CyberWhy. And then I read this. And I'm already I'm going to have to go back and kind of reconsider. This might change how I'm thinking about it. And what's funny about that, Tyler, is that you're already writing your retort to my article that's not finished.
Exactly. And I saw your part written article. I'm like, oh, well, he's wrong. I got to rate the counterpoint. Let's go. Game on.
Yeah. And you may have nothing to retort. I may have to turn an about face on that before I even get it published. I should have gotten it published on Saturday.
Yes, you should have, because then I would have something to retort.
Yeah.
Can we bring up the Silicon Valley Bank shares issue?
Yeah, let's go straight to that. Yep.
Do you mind jumping down to 24? Because the reason why I want to bring it up is it is breaking news literally right now. I'm watching a firestorm on some of my Slacks around this. 24 trends. Silicon Valley Bank shares slide on stock sale plan to cope with cash burn. At the time of the writing, it was a 40-something% dump in their stock price. At the last moment, I believe at the close of market, was 64% dump. And there is literally, my Slacks are blowing up right now from founders and investors basically saying, get your money the hell out of Silicon Valley Bank as fast as you possibly can, that there's a good chance they could go belly up. They were just basically completely beat down by the market turmoil and the dump in share cost of everything. And they might not have managed their cash deposits well enough to be able to stay liquid. So if we have any founders, I don't know how true this is. I don't want to spin up a oh shit moment that doesn't really need to be done. But I do know that some rather smart people, including Y Combinator, including trying to think of some of the other ones here, Founders Fund and others, have sent messages to their portfolio companies saying, please get your money out of Silicon Valley Bank immediately.
It sounds like a snowball effect. I mean, they've taken some actions to try and shore things up. But my understanding is they weren't getting the number of deposits that they would expect to, because startups aren't raising as often or as much, right? So it's interesting how just something like that, which you would think they'd be able to predict. Last April, I think we saw this trend starting, and we started talking about it. I don't know.
Yeah,
it says that quickly.
It says on this. I'm looking at a Wall Street Journal article here at the same time that just came out about an hour ago. That they're attempting to raise $2.25 billion right now to stay solvent. Basically by selling new shares in an attempt to get enough capital in that they can remain solvent. Essentially, I mean, I don't know if this is the case, but generally banks work with a multiplier on cash. You deposit $1, they loan that out multiple times, right? And basically you get this multiplier effect. And that's how the banking system, and specifically currency system, works. And when there's a massive, they call it a bank run, when a bank run occurs and everybody wants their cash at the same time, banks can't get the cash fast enough, right? Because it's all been loaned out too many times over. And, generally you have to have a certain amount of reserve. That's why they have the Federal Reserve, all sorts of things to back up and play that in a safe way. I don't know, but it could be that Silicon Valley Bank is in a world of hurt with regards to having enough liquid capital if people start hitting that bank looking for funding. And that's why they're raising $2.25 billion right now by selling a mix of common and preferred stock. They announced late Wednesday that it will book a $1.8 billion after-tax loss on sales of investments and seek to raise $2.25 billion ASAP. So I've heard counter stories, all these investors and folks telling the portfolio companies to get their money out of the bank, and then there's news articles online from Silicon Valley Bank representatives going, "Don't worry, we're fine. It's not an issue." So who knows? Who knows?
We've
what's
heard
real?
that.
Yeah, who knows?
Anybody remember 2008?
Yeah, exactly.
Heard that before. Oh boy.
But literally breaking news at the close of market today. Silicon Valley Bank CEO tells VC clients to, quote, stay calm. That was 2 hours ago.
Yeah, that's not having to say that out loud, I think makes it worse almost.
Yeah, he also said calls started coming, and they started a panic. There is ample liquidity to support our clients with one exception. If everyone is telling each other that SVB is in trouble, that could change. And that's exactly what's happening.
Right, but that's how banks are designed. Like it's like when the snow comes, like there's more than enough milk and bread for everybody. But if everybody panics and goes and buys 2 months worth of milk and bread, then that no longer becomes true.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when Silicon Valley Bank CEO tells everybody, "Hey, stay calm. As long as you don't go tell everybody to withdraw their cash, we'll be just fine." Immediately everybody's like, "I need to withdraw my cash, and I need to tell everybody else I know to withdraw, because clearly that's a problem." And that starts the bank run.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be the last one in line when the money runs out, or the next one in line. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Where else can we go here? So I've got a bunch of stuff here on AI news, and the reason for this is there's so much news about what's going on that actually it's story number 15 here. What OpenAI's API announcement means for makers. Things are moving fast here. And I think for people in security or people really in any tech industry need to know is kind of a higher level view of, okay, what's going on here? Like everybody's talking about ChatGPT. Before that, everybody was talking about DALL-E, but maybe you haven't heard of the other things that OpenAI is doing as well, and some of these other AI companies and stuff that's coming out, because they also have Whisper, which is a model that can convert audio into text. So and there's like 7 different products that they have here, and it's important to understand everything that's going on there, because this is stuff that's you're going to be running into at some point, or maybe somebody's going to be asking you about, how can we leverage this to make the SOC more efficient or something like that in 2 months from now, or maybe 2 years from now. It seems like everything's moving really fast.
Definitely not 2 years from now. It's absolutely an order of months before we start to see like some of those automation components come into play for cyber. I think the key thing here is like, okay, this stuff all came out last November or something, and it's people are realizing quickly that there's significant value in using some of this stuff, right? I believe it was this week. It could have been last week that they opened up. I think it was OpenAPI did it. Open their APIs, fully functional APIs at this point now, where before it was kind of limited to who had access to APIs to do different things, and it's turning into an even massive, like much larger adoption moment now that people can dev on top of OpenAPI as a fundamental underpinning, can create their own LLMs, can modify those LLMs, can train them in different ways, and make API calls to get the answers that they need in their moment of context. And again, it's all about understanding and context. And now they've made it easier to access that understanding and context about anything you want. This is massive. This is a game changer.
And LLM is a large language model, for those not familiar with that.
It's basically just taking a massive amount of language, and language is a fungible term. It's not just English or Spanish or Chinese.
Right.
It can be code is a language. I mean, there's lots of different things. The art is a language. Imagery is a language. Audio is a language. It's taking all of that data and giving you the ability to apply context and understanding to it to make smart decisions of what comes next. That's really what the fundamentals of generative AI are.
Right. And question to both of you, is OpenAI one of the biggest examples of product-led growth ever?
Whew. I don't know the numbers, but I know that they reached like I don't remember, was it 10 million or 100 million faster than any
100 million.
Yeah, 100 million faster than any other product in history. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely pretty damn crazy.
And the premium tier is $20 a month. How much money do you think they charge?
To what we were talking about, how consumer product or consumer focused products often are more slick and ready to go. People expect more out of them actually than these enterprise products that cost millions of dollars, and they accept quirkiness out of them.
Yeah, so are you saying ChatGPT was pretty polished, or
to the degree that it was pretty much impressing the hell out of a lot of people? I mean, it depends who you ask, right? Like if you ask me or you or Tyler, did this write good content? We'd be like, there's some problems here. It's a little glitchy. But for the average person, that's probably about as well as they write.
And I'll be honest with you, Katie. Yeah, better than the average for sure. And I'll be honest with you, Katie, the trick to generative AI is not just accepting the content as it is, but really what it solved for me is the blank page problem. So I took a job writing a blog post for somebody, and they wanted me to write a very dry blog post, something that I had no interest in writing. I didn't know how to do it. I'm like, how do I get started? I struggled. I put in a 5-bullet outline into ChatGPT. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. It jump-started me. I had the entire article done in 45 minutes, made $1,000. So, the interesting thing about that is if you prompt it right, it gives you exactly what you need to create fantastic content.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, for the average person, they looked at this and went, hallelujah, I never have to write anything again. Right? So, yeah. From that point of view, pretty polished. And it does, to the previous couple of comments, it does learn pretty well. So would this be acceptable in all scenarios? No, of course not. But it was rolled out without a huge number of glaring glitches for the vast majority of its potential user base.
Yeah. So AI bots are built into Slack now. So Salesforce, who owns Slack, who bought Slack, announced ChatGPT app for Slack now. It's built into one of the new search engines I use. It's either Neva or You. I think it's you.com, you.com, that has a chatbot built into it. I've been using it in Notion. So all of a sudden, like my personal use of generative AI, I didn't really play with the art tools very much at all. But the text-based stuff, as somebody who produces a lot of content, who writes a lot, who does a lot of research, like it went from nothing to daily use almost overnight, which is which is one of the reasons like a third of the news stories today are AI related, including one of our squirrel stories, which if our podcast is too long for you, story number 30, there is now ChatGPT for YouTube. You can have ChatGPT check out any of our podcast segments and create a summary for you from YouTube.
Well, they would certainly be more succinct than we are.
No, I can see exactly what ChatGPT would say about.
Apparently, you can.
ChatGPT.
No, I can't say anything apparently, but I do know what ChatGPT would say about our news segment. Made fun of marketing terms, talked about some weird funding that was too high or too low, and then laughed at each other about weird squirrel stories. That's pretty much every week.
Oh man,
That's fair.
We'll have to. This is just a free browser extension. I'll have to try this out. I suspect
yes,
what
I would
it's
love
doing,
to know what it says.
I suspect it's grabbing the transcription. If it's just a browser extension, it's probably just pulling that text transcription that YouTube automatically generates, and then just feeding that to an AI.
Probably.
Yep. Yeah, I'll have to try this out. Maybe we'll read one on air if it's funny or interesting or useful. Let's see what else. I would be remiss, Katie, if we did not talk about women in cyber. I noticed that you've had your newsletter. You touched on that. So why don't you? Would you mind taking that?
Yeah, sure. The first time I wrote about women in cyber was in 2017. I was working at the time for Misty, running the content for InfoSec World, and it was really shocking to me that we had so few women who were submitting proposals. And a lot of the women that actually came to be presenters at the conference were either me going out or me asking the women I knew to go out and recruit women so that we could have a better balance. And it was tough because women were a lot less likely to step up to the plate, and there were so many fewer of them. So I wrote about that also based on some previous experiences I'd had working with subject matter experts in the industry and just the low percentage of women. And so I revisited that in 2020 and then revisited it again and just put out a new post. I will put a caveat on the post. The first post that went out was the wrong version. Apologies. Check back on the site now. A first draft was loaded for me into the platform, but updates, no more typos. Sorry about that. But the new post, I talked to two women, Ellis and Ann Williams from InVeil, and then Inka, who was just on the podcast, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but I reached out to her because I thought she was fascinating. And so, based on some of my research and based on their experiences in the industry, this is just, it was for International Women's Day and Women's History Month, just tapping into their experiences and what we can do as an industry, because, it's certainly not just women that are underrepresented in security, but if you look from, 2009 to now, it looks like we've really grown our numbers. But if you look at the statistics from my last post, 2020 to now, we haven't grown the number of women in security to a statistically relevant point. It's by like 1 or 2 percentage points if you aggregate all of the data about the percentage of women in security, depending on which source you cite. And it hovers between like 24 and 26%, again, depending on the source. But if you look worldwide, women in the workforce represent 40%. 47%. Did I say that? 47%. So we're only at, let's say, an average of 25%. So you're almost half that, and that just doesn't make sense to me. If you look in the U.S., we're a little above 50%. Women represent 52-ish% of the population. So there's still a ton of work to be done. There's also a ton of work to be done in other underrepresented populations in security, as well as other industries too. But for International Women's Day, just wanted to talk to 2 amazingly impressive women, and so go read their stories.
And where can they read those?
Sorry. Substack, The Reformed Analyst.
There you go. That is Katie's Substack, The Reformed Analyst. And we have a story here. Let's see, it's number 25. Richard Stinnen, who has this amazing database of vendors and products in cybersecurity for Women's Month, for International Women's Month. He pulled some stats here, for International Women's Day. on March 8th, which was yesterday. The stats on 3,309 cybersecurity vendors, only 72 have female CEOs. That's 2.1%, which I always like taking stats like that and giving them some context. And so Fortune 500 is 4.2% women. So it's roughly, or not roughly, exactly half of what we see in the Fortune 500. So yeah, there are some significant.
When I did my last post, Adrian, in 2020, I used the database of the company I was working for at the time, and that came up with about 5%. And I knew at the time that data wasn't necessarily accurate. Richard Steenan's database is much bigger and much more thorough, but based on the information I was allowed to use, it was 5%. So this is shoring that up and makes it even more kind of stunning to see how lacking the industry is in terms of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, it would be great to see some funds that are. I'm sure there's got to be some funds that are dedicated to addressing this particular issue. Tyler, I don't know if I hate to put you on the spot, but
yeah,
I want to say I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head. I know Chen Wang runs a fund that I believe does a fairly significant. Her fund is women run. I don't believe it requires women founders, but there are absolutely, and I could be wrong about that. You should look it up. But there's a number of funds out there that are specifically geared towards minorities, female, people of color, all sorts of different fund structures, and many of them are investing in cyber. So I think this is something that we recognize is a problem in the VC industry, and we're trying to get more diverse as much as we possibly can. But it is a hard thing to solve, and it just doesn't solve overnight. It's not like we can just snap our fingers and fix the problem.
No, and that's the reason to talk about it. And it's not just a woman problem; it's a whole industry problem. I know I've done a little bit of digging into this, and there are a couple of firms that I know offhand, like the Female Founders Fund, Rethink Impact is one of them. There's another one called Valor Ventures that also does a lot of digging into, and investing into women and people of color. And I'm sure there are many others that aren't coming to mind now, but there are absolutely VCs out there that are looking for this. But it's really all about, raising those voices and just highlighting, really good work by these people and showing that you don't have to be a certain stereotype to be in any industry. It doesn't matter who you are. If you have an interest, there's always room for you, especially in an industry like ours that needs creativity.
Hear, hear. Seconded.
All right. And I think, we like to end on a non sequitur, something kind of funny. And I think that's got to be story number 27 here. We have 5 squirrel stories because I've been really distracted this last week. So I've had a lot of squirrels running around in my attic. And 28 is pretty funny. 28, I'll just briefly mention, imagine Clubhouse, but somebody just randomly calls you and talks to you for 5 minutes on the phone. That's what the Anyone app is. It's a 5-minute phone call with a stranger.
So this will never take off.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk on the phone.
Exactly. This will never take off because if you talk to everyone that's of the age that would use it, they don't call each other anyways. They don't even FaceTime each other. They just use Snapchat or slide into my DMs or whatever goofy thing the millennials are using these days anyways. And Yeah, this if it does take off, it will rapidly devolve into pick up the phone and somebody insults you for 5 minutes and then they hang up on you.
Yeah, Tyler, I just have to point out that if you're using the phrase whatever they use these days, meaning whatever these kids these days use, you are officially old.
Katie, get off my lawn. Just get off my lawn.
Oh, what was the day today? It was
get over it.
Get over it. Yeah,
exactly.
Hey, Tyler, get over it. You're old.
Yeah, I'm over it. What can I say?
But
well, you woke up my snoring dog too, so.
I was enjoying the snoring.
Yeah.
But like Tyler said, if you only check out one story from today's show, that should be Daniel Meisler's How AI is Eating the Software World. You can probably just search on that and find it. But if you have time for two and want to laugh, number 27, I've been getting into this kind of like designers having fun, going down this rabbit hole. Like there's this guy who has a newsletter who sends out like a fake mock-up of an app that already exists. Like he had this food delivery app where it was like gently used food. Like somebody took a bite of it, didn't like it. He does this daily, but this is another one in the same vein where people were challenged with coming up with the worst volume sliders imaginable. And it's just absolutely delightful. I love it. It's like, how hard can you make changing the volume?
Sorry, speaking of volume, that was supposed to be on mute. I hit the wrong button.
Bless you.
Thank you. I was already muted, and I hit the mute button, ended up unmuting, and then sneezing.
I don't think I should share. I will say my favorite is the very last one, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that's going to click the link and check it out. But my very favorite is the last one.
I'm in that rat hole right now, and it is absolutely amazing. It is so good.
All right, and with that, thanks so much, Tyler and Katie, for joining me today. It's been lovely. It was a good episode today. And a big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will be back next week. Bye-bye.